Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sunday Matinee. We are on episode 4. We took a week off so that everyone could get caught up with Marvel and other cool stuff. Plus, I was also in a Zoom-like show last week, and I like to take advantage of every opportunity I can get to do theater stuff because it's hard to do right now. So, joining me again this week is Sarah Moore.
Uh,
And the big topic this week is Christopher Nolan, a sort of director profile, a look back at his filmography. This is actually the episode that I originally pitched to Sarah way back at the beginning of the summer to sort of try and get her in to do this. So it took us a couple episodes to get there, but we're here now. Um, so just a few housekeeping things to get through. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. If you have any questions or anything you want to shine some light on, you want to be on the show, whatever, you can always send an email to fisheyelenseesall@gmail.com. Also, please send us your trivia. I did not get any trivia this week, so I had to come up with some myself to try and stump Sarah today. So we're going to jump into the news here with the big thing that happened this weekend is Tenet finally opened in theaters in the United States. Yesterday, Warner Brothers reported that through yesterday it was estimated to make about $20 million, which they're saying is not bad, all things considered. And one thing that really disappointed me is that apparently Tenet did not open in drive-in theaters in areas where indoor cinemas are closed, which means that here in Washington State, where theaters are still mostly closed, there was like no way to see Tenet unless I wanted to drive all the way down. And I'm in Auburn, which is 20 some miles south of Seattle. I would have to travel to Olympia, which is about 50 miles south from me. That's like the only place that theaters are open near me. And traveling to Olympia to see a movie by myself during a pandemic is not worth it.
oh, interesting. I didn't know that theaters were open in Olympia.
I think they're a phase ahead of like everyone else. That what I can't remember what county Olympia is in, but yeah, it's Olympia and Chehalis have theaters
Oh,
open.
hmm.
So, but yeah, no. Sarah, of course, knows that I'm willing to travel great distances to see movies with friends.
Yeah.
We used to do that a lot. But yeah, no, I'm not traveling a great distance during a pandemic just to see a movie. So yeah, really disappointed that it didn't open in drive-ins because that's the safe way to do that. And there are quite a few drive-ins open, not near here, but within that 50-mile radius, which wouldn't be so bad. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. I feel like September is going to be the month that really tests how safe it is to go to an indoor cinema, with Tenet being the first really big movie to open. And honestly, I've talked about how I don't think people should be going to indoor cinemas, but if we get through September and October and cinemas do sort of pass that safety test, I would consider by the end of October, November, when, say, No Time to Die and Black Widow and Wonder Woman are supposed to be opening, that, if cinemas are sort of deemed safe at that point, I would consider it, because, especially No Time to Die, because I've seen all the Bond movies in the theater since Goldeneye, and I kind of want to keep that streak going. But we'll see. Sarah, what do you think? Would you consider a fall or winter movie if cinemas are sort of looked at as safe by that point?
I would probably not, just because I'm kind of higher risk. So yeah, I'm probably not, unfortunately, going to be able to go to the theater until there's a vaccine coming out, which is sad. But yeah, I the whole, like, it not coming out in drive-through, is that because, do you think that's because generally drive-through theaters play second run movies? Like, I don't, like, have drive-throughs ever really had like new movies that are just premiering in the theater, because I feel like all the ones around me have always been movies that have been out for a while. But
Oh yeah, back when the what we had one over in the north side of Auburn, they would always play new movies. Um, usually the second feature might be one that's a little bit older, but traditionally the first feature is a new movie.
oh, interesting.
Um, and the drive-ins around here have been playing Bill and Ted and New Mutants, and that one Russell Crowe movie that I keep forgetting the title of, but so they've been playing those three new movies. But yeah, I think there was just sort of a deal that they couldn't do Tenet. I think I read in the article that I read about the 20 million from Warner Brothers that it has everything to do with like the sound quality, because obviously you're going to get a better sound quality in an indoor cinema than you are from the radio of your car.
Yeah. So do you think it's something like that might come to drive-throughs later, like after it's been out in theaters for a while, or I don't know, I'm curious.
I hope so. We've talked about this several times in different episodes, but I hope that a lot of these movies that are opening right now, at least the big ones like Tenet that people really do want to go see, may get a second run sometime next year. Or there's the possibility that they're just going to have an incredibly long run while there are very few movies playing in theaters. The
Yeah,
way that you just kind of roll.
it makes me really sad. You were talking about the James Bond movies. Like the only Christopher Nolan movies I haven't seen in the theater are We're Following and Insomnia. I've seen all the rest of his movies in the theater, and so I'm feeling pretty sad that I don't get to see Tenet right now. It's sad.
Yeah, I've caught all of his movies since Batman Begins in the theater, except for Dunkirk. Um, and Inception being such a monumentally amazing film that it was 10 years ago, um, I really do want to see Tenet because it looks like, if not a secret sequel, then at the very least a spiritual successor. Uh, and just in terms of its like style and tone, definitely looks more like Inception than any other Nolan film has.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. From what I've seen, I mean, obviously he doesn't like to give much in the trailer, but yeah, it does kind of have a Inception vibe for sure.
So that's the big box office news. I don't think there are too many other big movies opening this month, so it's probably going to be Tenet all the way. So we're going to move on to another big sort of COVID-related news, and that is so the Batman at Warner Brothers recently resumed production in England, where it is slightly safer than it is here in the States. But Robert Pattinson this last week tested positive for COVID-19, which is a real shame considering he is playing the Batman himself. So, yeah, they kind of had to shut that down. And it sounds like they're resuming production without Robert Pattinson. So it sounds like it's time to film all those villain scenes.
Did you hear that? Even vampires can get COVID.
Yep, the undead are not immune, as it turns out.
No, that's a bad joke.
You know,
I definitely hope that he recovers quickly and doesn't have any problems with it.
absolutely same. Yeah, and hey, jokes are fine. We need humor in these times. And finally, in the news, Mulan finally dropped on Disney Plus this weekend, and I had mentioned that there was a talk about it was going to be coming to the regular rotation in December last week, but that news had kind of been shut down by Disney. It has now since been confirmed by Disney. So if you do not want to pay $30 to see Mulan and you are a Disney Plus subscriber, you just have to wait 3 months and it's yours to watch. So I'm still not sure if I'm going to lay down the $30. I might, just so I can maybe get a review in. You know, so far it's in the high 70s on the Rotten Tomatoes. A lot of critics are saying it's probably the best live action Disney adaptation so far. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I haven't seen any of these live action adaptations, so I really can't compare.
I've seen a couple of them. I haven't seen all of them. Actually, my favorite so far has been Cinderella. But I actually don't like the Cinderella cartoon. It's my least favorite of the like Disney classic cartoons. And I really enjoyed the live action one, possibly maybe because it had Rob Stark in it. Might have been a big part of that, but
What? A
but
Game
it
of
was
Thrones
also
connection?
yeah. Actually, there were two Game of Thrones actors in it. I
Oh,
can't remember the name of the other actor, but he played he was in season 2, and I'm totally blanking on his character's name, but I remember he was the one that got locked in the tomb with Dany's handmaiden because they betrayed her.
oh yeah, I remember that. That was,
Yeah,
geez,
he
that
was
was
in it too.
wow. That show was almost 10 years ago. That's crazy to think.
Yeah. I know, and it's funny, like nobody talks about it anymore because people like hated the ending so much. It's like it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's what'll happen. All right, so that's basically some of the big stuff that's been going on in Hollywood land this week. So let's jump into the main topic: Christopher Nolan. 10 films to be discussed here today. Um, some of them may not get as much time, but Christopher Nolan. I really one of the reasons I kind of attach myself to Christopher Nolan is because he actually is a big name director who like literally has sort of built his career in my lifetime, which is really cool to sort of see that part be a part of film history, as opposed to as much. I love Spielberg, but Spielberg, of course, began well before I was born, well before you were born. So Nolan is kind of a director for our generation. So
Yeah, he really following's like 1998 or 97.
yes,
Yeah,
1998.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, and he's a director who really started making movies around the time that I could actually start appreciating films on a critical level, as opposed to just entertainment. So his first film is a very short film, about 70 minutes long. It's called Following. And I put it down here as it's sort of the blueprint for a lot of his future films. It's a black and white. It's neo noir.
It cost $7,000, or sorry, $6,000 to make. It cost him $6,000 to make, which blows me away. If you've seen the movie,
it looks really good for an indie
yeah.
film. I'd say it's got that same quality as say like Clerks. Like how did you make a movie that good on such a small budget?
But better acting than Clerks.
That's true. I love Clerks, but Following is
I love Clerks, but it's pretty cheesy at points.
Following is also it's a better script.
Yeah, definitely.
And what makes it the blueprint? Well, it's a big part of it is it's not told in the actual order of events, and that's going to be a running trademark with Nolan. Yeah, very non-linear. I've only actually seen it twice, including recently when I watched all the movies. But yeah, I found it just fascinating how he could take just $6,000 and make a movie like that, and make a movie with I don't know how I did this with Memento either, but make a story that works in a nonlinear fashion, because not a lot of directors try to do that. You'll occasionally see, and I think you see this more in television than you do in film. You'll see a television show open with a cold open that starts at the end, usually with one of the main characters either seemingly dead or in distress, and then the rest of the episode will jump back to 2 days earlier and build up to the end. But you don't typically see a TV show either like completely told out of order in order to make the story work.
Yeah. And I would, and also along with that, like his movies, like, not only do they really work that way, but they really need to be told non-linearly, because when you think about, I know we're not getting to Memento yet, but when you think about the story of Following and Memento, like, the stories wouldn't be that interesting or innovative, like, if they were just told. I mean, they wouldn't be as interesting, but because they're told in a non-linear way, it like heightens the suspense like so much more.
Well, I think we should just lump Memento into this conversation anyway, since we're kind of already there. Um, because one of the criticisms I've seen of Memento, and I think it's a dumb criticism,
No
is
criticisms for that movie or
um, is anyone who says, "Well, this movie doesn't work if you just watch it forwards." And it's like, well, yeah, but you're not meant to watch it, you know, that way. You're meant to watch it the way that Nolan,
yeah. Yeah. Well,
directed
and
it and
it's
edited it
not.
together.
Yeah, and the misnomer with that is that it's not just told. A lot of people are like, "Oh, it's told backwards," but it's not just told backwards. It's actually told from the beginning and the end backwards, the beginning forwards, and then they meet in the middle. Like, it's not actually all just backwards.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to lay that criticism down on Memento, then I could just as easily say, uh,
I got a
well,
Michael Bay movie for you.
I'd just say, well, take your Michael Bay movie and watch it backwards. Um, does it make sense backwards? No, but that's not how Michael Bay intended it. So, these films are meant to be watched the way the director intended, to a degree. Apart from film criticism, of course, it's fun to break them down the way we do. You can actually watch it forwards on one of the DVDs.
I have that DVD version. You have to jump through a lot of hoops. Like, it's a very hard to find Easter egg, but yeah, you can watch it in, I wouldn't say forwards, you can watch it in chronological order.
I also have that DVD. And yes, you do have to jump through quite a few hoops to do it. I never did, because I never really wanted to know what it felt like going linear.
I got to it, but I didn't watch very far into it because it's not as interesting that way. Like, it was fun to find it, but then I didn't really care.
With both Memento and Following, part of the fun of that is asking the questions: how did we get to this? And Following is even more out of order than Memento. Memento at least sort of follows sequences from the end to the beginning, and again from the black and white is sort of that point where they meet. But but I love in Following the point where you start to see the protagonist with his haircut, or you see the cut lip, and you ask, okay, where did that happen? And then you finally get that answer. And I love that in Memento too. Anytime you see, like, you get to that point where you find out how the car window got broken.
Yeah. Or you find out why people have bruises, or it's cool. I think I don't remember when I first watched Following. It was after Memento, because I saw Memento in the theater, and I think I found Following later because I just interested in seeing his first movie. And it was a time, I think, when I was feeling kind of burnt out on the huge amount of CG that was being put in movies constantly, because it was kind of like, right, after Lord of the Rings, everybody wanted CG everything, and then I remember watching that movie and just being so it was so refreshing to see a movie that was so low budget, but so but just like you wanted to keep watching it, like you were so enthralled with it based on just the acting, the writing, and the editing. Like, that was all it needed to be a really compelling movie.
Yeah, Memento was my first exposure to Nolan as well. I didn't get to see it in the theater, but I remember I'd wanted to see it because of Guy Pearce. This was shortly after a friend had convinced me to watch LA Confidential, and after I saw that, I wanted to see everything with Kevin Spacey and Guy Pearce and Russell Crowe.
LA Confidential is a good one.
Yep.
I
Great film.
definitely was like, oh, Guy Pearce from LA Confidential when the movie came out. Like that was something that drew me to it and made me go see it in the theater. And then also just I remember reading reviews and that it was this really like crazy, twisty noir that was told backwards. And so all of us in like the theater department were like, ooh, we got to go see that. It's like the new artsy, cool movie.
Yeah, I think I'd also heard from someone about how the story was told backwards, and yeah, that was definitely fascinating. But it was definitely like Guy Pearce for sure that drew me in. Um, and kind of a shame that the Guy Pearce hasn't popped up in any other Chris Nolan movies.
Yeah. Or just that
I
he doesn't pop up a lot in general. I mean, I know he still acts, but he definitely, it's like few and far between. And
Yep.
he's a good actor. I'm sad I don't get to see him in more things right now.
And I think Iron Man
Harry
3,
and Moss I haven't seen in a lot lately either, but I guess they're making a
yeah,
Matrix movie, but
yeah. And I know that The Matrix was definitely one of the reasons that Nolan cast
mhm.
Carrie Ann Moss, and Joe Pantoliano, I think, actually came at
Yeah,
her
yeah,
recommendation.
yeah.
So it was really that was a cool bonus too, to say, oh, cool, two actors from The Matrix, another great movie from back at that early turn of the century time. Um, and what a different twist to see Joe Pantoliano not playing a slimy villain. He's still pretty slimy, but like
Yeah,
not.
but you just it's not what you think. I think that's what's so fun about that movie is that it's a mystery, but really what's being revealed is not like the typical mystery. It's like the characters' motivations and who they really are is like what's being revealed.
Yeah, that last scene, that last first scene, I should say.
Well,
Um,
last middle scene.
yeah, just that whole reveal of why, and I love that, and you don't see this again. It's hard to do this in films, but what I love about Guy Pearce is he's such an unreliable narrator.
Hmm.
Like, by the time you get to the end of the film, you just can't trust anything he says. When you hear about you know the Sammy Jenkins story he's always telling, it's like, is that real, or is that just part of his life that he has either blocked out or forgotten? Um, and it's a little frightening to think that deep down he has to, like, just because of that ending, he has to know that part of what he's doing is just repeating over and over again, tracking down a killer, because he consciously chooses to just keep it going.
Yeah, nah, no,
So
it's definitely that movie. I feel like I've rewatched that movie so many times, and I watched it the other night just because I hadn't seen it in a long time, and I wanted it kind of fresh in my mind for this because it's still like my favorite Christopher Nolan movie, and it's pretty much constantly been in my top 5 movies of all time since I saw it the first time. Um, and it's still held up. Like it's in for me personally, it's like a perfect movie. Like there's nothing I would do differently about that movie. It's perfect. Like it's just yeah.
and that actually brings me to another criticism that gets that, that people bring up about some of Nolan's films, that I can't agree with, is a lot of people, especially with, I think, the Memento and the Prestige, will say, well, once you've seen it, you don't need to see it again because you know how it ends. And that's kind of the whole point of it. It's like, well, no, not really. And we'll get to why with the Prestige soon. But like, yeah, with
That's
Memento
hilarious.
was,
Those are the two I've rewatched the most of all his movies.
I think Prestige is probably, of his non-Batman films, the one I've seen the most. It might be Memento, though. I hadn't watched when I watched it last week. It was the first. It was, again, for me, the first time I'd watched it in a while too. But yeah, when I first got it on DVD, I probably watched it like a dozen times. In that year, first year I had it. So
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah,
if anybody who doesn't want to rewatch his movies because they know the ending, they're missing out on I mean, no wonder they don't get what the big deal about him is because I feel like what I love about him as a director is his like attention to detail. And when you rewatch the movies, you see how much foreshadowing there is to everything that happens like later. I mean, it's like he's really thought of like every frame and everything that happens is like foreshadowing to something else. And there's always tons of clues and Easter eggs like peppered through his movies. And
with Memento, it had been long enough that I'd forgotten a lot of those little details. I remembered, that he kills Joe Pantoliano, and I remembered that at the end of the movie, it's revealed that he, basically set himself up to do that. But I'd forgotten a lot of those little details about like, oh, how does he, like, what's the deal with the Jaguar, and why do people keep commenting on how'd you get that car? Like, oh yeah, that's how he gets the car.
What are you doing going around in that suit, or like, or even like the little, like there's some little like tiny frames where you like when he's showing. Are we worried about spoilers?
I'm just going to drop this right now. Because this is Christopher Nolan, we are probably going to be dropping a ton of spoilers.
Yeah.
I
mean, Memento came out in 2000. Probably should have seen it.
Yeah, so, the most recent movie apart from Tenet is Dunkirk, and I'm really, spoiler alert, they escaped the beach in Dunkirk. So most of the soldiers escaped the beach in Dunkirk. So, but that's history. So, not really a spoiler. Yes, we will definitely be talking about spoilers. So if you haven't seen Memento or whatnot, or a lot of his non-Batman films, because the Batman films don't have major spoilers, I wouldn't say.
No, yeah, I mean, other probably than people that die.
There's a handful, but like I think just about everyone has seen the Batman films at this point.
Probably. Who's going to?
So yeah, be prepared for spoilers, especially for stuff like Memento and The Prestige. And Inception, to a degree, is less of a spoilery movie. That one's really more of a ride.
Yeah. But what I was going to say that's spoilery, there's a couple times where he does a little tiny quick frame, like when Leonard's talking about Sammy Jenkins, and it shows him sitting in the ward or whatever, and for just a split second, it's Leonard, like, but it's like a blink and you'd miss it, like it's just this tiny little frame. And then even like there's parts in it where you see a quick little frame where after his wife's supposedly been killed, you see her open her eyes like really quickly. And it's stuff like that. Like I didn't like, I didn't notice in the first viewing, but later I was like, oh.
That goes on hand in hand with Leonard as an unreliable narrator. Like I love it. It's one of the few films where you can afford to do an unreliable narrator and make it work. So, yeah.
The scene too with Carrie-Anne Moss, where you finally kind of find out what her real deal is when she like messes with him,
I love that moment.
That blew me away. I was like, oh my God, that's, and that's what's so cool about, I mean, he didn't tell this story backwards just to tell it backwards, although it's not backwards, but he does the 20-minute scenes backwards because he's trying to give you like the same mindset as Leonard. So you're going into each scene like knowing nothing like Leonard does. So you're seeing this scene where she's being all like, oh, this guy beat me up, and he's trying to like comfort her and all this stuff. And then you go back and see the scene before, which he didn't remember, and you find out it's Leonard that like beat her up. I mean, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and this is after at the beginning of the movie, where the first time you see her is like what, the night after they spend the night together. Yeah. And it's like, oh, cool. So these two are the happy lovers, and it's like, oh no,
they're not.
No, they are not. I love that moment. Actually, no, wait. The first time you meet Carrie-Anne Moss is in the diner at the end, where she says, "You don't remember me."
Yeah.
And then it's actually a little bit heartbreaking in that scene after he stays with her, where she kisses him and says, "You will remember me." And it's like, oh no, we already know he doesn't.
Yeah, I know.
That hurts. As
Yeah.
terrible as some of these, as pretty much actually all of the people are in that movie, I don't think there's actually a good person in it. They're all pretty
No. Maybe his
terrible.
wife was good. I don't know. We didn't really
Well,
know her very well, but
um, and Sammy Jenkins and his wife. I mean,
yeah.
I assumed that they
I don't think
are.
Sammy Jenkins. He says in it, Joe, Teddy, the character of Teddy, says Sammy Jenkins didn't have a wife. He was a person that was trying.
That's right.
He apparently was a person that was running a con that he came across when he was an insurance agent.
That's right.
Yeah, I know.
So yeah,
It's those little details like that you won't catch until like your fifth viewing. That's what I think is cool.
so yeah, everyone in Memento is a bad person, but you do still kind of feel sorry for them,
Mm-hmm.
because of these tragic predicaments that they're stuck in, especially Leonard. Can't
Yeah.
remember. He's a terrible person, but he's never going to remember how terrible he is.
No. Well, and you wonder, like, I don't. It's like if he does, it's like, yeah, how much can you be held accountable for your actions if it's like the past Leonard set this thing up, but is the future Leonard accountable if he doesn't remember that he did that? Like,
Yeah.
it's definitely a movie you think about for a long time afterward, which is why I think it's perfect. But
It also has, I think, one of the funniest moments of just a drama movie in that time, and that's the scene that starts out with Leonard saying, I'm chasing this guy.
Yep.
Oh, nope, he's chasing me.
No, he's chasing me. Also, he's like, when he's like got the bottle of alcohol in the bathroom, and he's like, I don't feel drunk.
Yeah. Yep, and I love how they show how he got that bottle before, and it's like, oh, okay, so yeah, it was supposed to be a weapon the whole time. Cool.
I know, it's so funny. No, it's just yeah. I watched it again, and I was just like, yep, this movie is every bit as good as I remembered it being.
Yep. I'm definitely thinking about upgrading to the Blu-ray at some point.
Yeah. And when I just found out, I didn't realize Following has a Criterion release.
Yeah, that I
need to
think
get that.
I can't remember when it came to Criterion. I think it was after. Oh gosh, it was after we met, because you introduced me to Following, because we were talking about Inception when we met, and
yeah.
I think it was originally on Netflix when I first watched it.
Mm.
So I don't think Criterion had gobbled it up yet. I say gobbled it up, but they treat their films very well.
I've seen of that. I had no idea it had a Criterion release. So I feel like maybe it was recent. I don't know.
So yeah, Memento, Following, The Beginnings.
Go watch them if you haven't seen them. Well, at this point they've been spoiled, but if you skip through the spoiling parts, go see them if you haven't seen them. Well, actually, we didn't really spoil Following, so go.
We really didn't. Even if you felt spoiled, you should watch these films. They're fascinating films. Mm-hmm. They're incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But this is just the beginning, because after Memento, Steven Soderbergh approached Christopher Nolan.
We have a cameo incoming.
Uh-oh. A cameo.
A cameo.
Uh-oh. I was told to pop in, so I'm popping. Add After Effects later.
Dustin, how do you like Memento?
I've always enjoyed that film, just because it makes you work, it makes you think, and it was fabulously well executed, in my opinion.
He watched it with me the other night, so.
Yeah, it was good to have it refreshed. But just like, even from the very, very beginning, you're like, things might not be everything that they seem. But it's just a wonderful non-linear film. I really enjoyed it. what do you? You've probably already talked about this.
We just gave a lot of spoilers for it, or I gave a lot of spoilers
Yeah.
for it.
Gotta have those spoiler tags.
But it did come out 2000. It came out 20 years
20
ago.
years.
That's nuts. Oh my gosh.
Dustin, since you're here, off the top of your head, what is your favorite Christopher Nolan film?
Oh man, that's hard. I have a soft spot for Inception, just because I saw it in a very difficult part of my life. So yeah, I know it's a little more mainstream than the rest of his library, but I really just felt a lot of things through that movie, and so I will always appreciate it.
Well, anyone who says mainstream films are bad, they can shut up, because there's nothing wrong with a film being mainstream as long as it's good and not Transformers. If you're going to downvote this video because I don't like
Inception is
Michael
an
Bay,
excellent mainstream movie. I remember when it came out, people being like, "See, you can make an interesting mainstream movie."
Well, thank you for inviting me to pop in. I wanted to say hello. You guys enjoy the movie conversation.
Thank you, Dustin. Mainstream films can be good. If any of you out there are going to downvote this video for that Transformers comment, I regret nothing.
I regret nothing either, and I didn't even make it.
So we were moving on to Insomnia. So yeah, we were before we started filming, we were talking about how if you didn't know that Chris Nolan directed this, if you went into it blind, you probably wouldn't assume he did. Steven Soderbergh approached him after he saw Memento and said, "I want you to direct this, this suspense thriller we've got over at Warner Brothers."
It's a remake of a Scandinavian movie.
Yep. Yeah. It is the only film of Christopher Nolan's that he does not receive a writing credit on, even though, according to IMDb, he did write the final shooting script. So I guess he did write it, but you just don't see his name on it except as a director.
Yeah. It also really doesn't have a non-linear, which I feel like most of Nolan's other movies have something non-linear in them, even if it's not the whole movie.
Yeah, this one is very straightforward. I don't mean that as a criticism against it.
No,
it's a very good thriller. It's also unique in that one, it doesn't have any of those trademark Nolanisms about it, but two, it's another one of those films where he didn't work with any. I don't think he worked with any of the other actors again. He certainly didn't work with Pacino or Robin Williams in the future. There may have been one of the secondary characters who may have shown up in another film, but I
didn't recognize anybody from it as being in any of his other movies.
So yeah, it really stands apart, but it is. It's basically a murder mystery, but so Al Pacino, yeah, very character driven.
I guess that would be a Nolan trademark. It's more focused on revealing things about the characters than the killer.
So Al Pacino and Martin Donovan play two detectives who are sent up to Alaska to help investigate a murder. Part of their characters' arc is that Los Angeles Internal Affairs is investigating both of them, and it's revealed later that Martin Donovan, I guess we're going into spoiler territory, so Martin Donovan has something on Al Pacino.
2002.
Yeah, again, this is an almost 20-year-old film. But during the course of the investigation, Pacino accidentally shoots Martin Donovan, his partner, but it may or may not be accidental. One of the big parts of this film is that they're in Alaska, and they're in one of those places in Alaska at the time of year where the sun doesn't set. Hence the title. Al Pacino is having a lot of trouble trying to sleep during this film, not just because of the fact that it's always daylight. Once he kills his partner, And he has to keep that a secret because of the internal affairs investigation. And Robin Williams plays the killer who sees him kill his partner. So they kind of have this this little deal going on where I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine, that kind of. So it actually, I feel like it's sort of a precursor to not necessarily the Batman Joker relationship, but that same kind of dynamic, the "you complete me" dynamic. Because I don't know, it's just Robin Williams, and it was such a different role for Robin Williams. I think it was like his first. It's his first big non-comedic role that I remember, or at least his first drama role.
I was reading in IMDb that I think that year he actually played kind of a antagonist in 2 films, Insomnia and then one called 1 Hour Photo. But that was really his first time ever playing like the antagonist of a movie.
Yeah, I shouldn't say it was his first dramatic role because obviously he'd done Good Will Hunting. But yeah, this is like his first time playing like an antagonistic role and a villain. And
yeah,
I think Nolan got a really good performance out of him.
Well, he doesn't even really come into the movie till almost an hour into it too, which was kind of
crazy. And unlike some of the antagonists, very over the top, still very good performances from Heath Ledger and Tom Hardy in the Batman movies, but they are comic book villains.
Mm-hmm.
Robin Williams is very, very restrained, which I think is what's particularly frightening because we're used to him being, we're used to zany Williams. We're used to Mrs. Doubtfire, Toys, Jumanji. We're used to him playing these really big, fun characters, and he is just...
He's just very creepy in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. But because it's Robin Williams, I think you still kind of have a little bit of sympathy for him at the outset, maybe. And then you just kind of find out that he's really, not a good guy.
Yeah. And a good performance from Pacino as well.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Pacino often, because I think he overacts a little bit. Sorry if that's but I felt like this was a good role for him. Like he was very subdued compared to normal.
I think Pacino has sort of been typecast, had for years been typecast because of The Godfather. They had to throw him into Martin Scorsese stuff and, doing a lot of, crime movies with mob movies. And so this was a very different type of role than, that sort of mob movie that you're used to. And then, of course, it features native Washingtonian Hilary Swank.
Yeah, was that, I can't remember, was that one of her first post Oscar win roles, or?
No, that was, wait, that's right. She won the Oscar for Boys Don't Cry. So yeah,
that's what I meant. Yeah,
I was jumping into $1 Million Baby. Yeah, this was in between Boys Don't Cry and $1 Million Baby. So I think $1 Million Baby was the one that really put her in the spotlight for sure. Really got audiences to know who she was. But yeah, this was after that Oscar win. So, if you're into movies, you knew who Hilary Swank was. And she does a really good job in this one too. She kind of represents the true moral backbone of the story. And it is kind of weird watching this movie with everything that's going on with defund police this year.
Yeah.
Because you look at Pacino and, yeah, he's definitely corrupt, but he's definitely not positioned as bad. But at the same time, a bad cop is a bad cop. But I think it was really good. It was a really uplifting at the end for him to say, to Hilary Swank, don't hold back that truth about me.
Yeah, don't start yourself down that path.
Yeah, you can still be the good cop.
Yeah. Which is interesting. I was reading that the Norwegian original, or I can't remember if it was Norwegian or Swedish, and it was some Scandinavian. It was one of those two. I read that in the original, that actually at the end, that Hilary Swank character brings him the shell she found, and she just like tosses it on the table and walks away. So like it's apparently it's darker. Like you get the feeling that that's all going to blow over and no one's going to find out about it. But, so it's interesting that they changed that in the American one.
I'm not surprised. You know,
Not
U.S.
surprised
audiences
either.
are U.S. audiences
We
prefer
like our
that sort of
definitive endings.
happy ending. They're, you know, over in Europe, they're used to their dour endings.
Yeah, it sounds like the original is quite a bit darker actually than the and they had a list of some of the reasons, but sounds like it's quite a bit darker from the remake that Christopher Nolan did.
Yeah. I want to, since we're talking about this, I want to share this quote from the movie. I thought it was a really good one. A good cop can't sleep because he's missing a piece of the puzzle, and a bad cop can't sleep because his conscience won't let him. Let that sink in 2020. That's a pretty heavy quote right there. Let that sink in, everyone. After Memento and Insomnia, I think there was a lot of talk going around about Nolan sort of being the new Alfred Hitchcock of our generation. And I don't, you know, I understand why people make those comparisons. I don't always like them. Nolan is not the new Hitchcock. Nolan has clearly defined himself as the new Nolan.
Yeah, he's just his own thing.
So, yeah, I mean, I get it. To this point, all of his films had sort of been, you know, suspense or thriller. Following definitely does have an old school Hitchcock vibe to it, with the seemingly, you know, nondescript man who gets into a world that he never would have imagined, and of course, it is the dark world of crime. So I get that comparison, but Nolan definitely has, as we'll see coming up, has proven that Nolan is Nolan, and yeah. So 3 years after Insomnia, Nolan did this little movie about this very unknown character by the name of Bruce Wayne. You might know him otherwise as Batman.
And the reboots began. No.
And yes, Batman. It was definitely an interesting choice back in 2005 to have Chris Nolan, because you know his films definitely had the drama, they had the suspense, they didn't have the action yet. You know, Insomnia has a couple of action scenes, and they're really just limited to fist fights and very small gunfights. He had not done anything, but
maybe probably running over the logs was the fanciest
action
scene in that.
That was actually, then that is a great action scene.
Yeah,
great chase. But it was kind of the style back in those times when all these studios were trying to find new footing with their comic book films. You had Bryan Singer taking on the X-Men, and you know his big film was The Usual Suspects. That's what got him X-Men. You know, before Sam Raimi did Spider-Man, he was mostly, I'd say to this day, he's still mostly known for the Evil Dead trilogy. He's definitely done stuff since. He did Darkman and a handful of other films, but really, and you can see in the Spider-Man trilogy his love for Evil Dead. You know, the chainsaw appears, I think, in one of the movies. So it was not entirely unprecedented for Warner Brothers to pick a sort of indie director to reboot Batman.
Especially after the travesty of Batman and Robin.
Yeah. And I think that's why Batman Begins is so recognized for being the big reboot, because Batman was that franchise that desperately needed it. They couldn't pick
Totally
up where
jumped
they
the
had left off. Yeah. So I think it was definitely important for them to bring Christopher Nolan, a director who has a sense of character, to tell the story of Bruce Wayne. And thankfully, people talk about how we see the origin story of Bruce Wayne too much. Really, we've only seen it twice. Well, I guess we do see it a third time in Batman versus Superman, but it's during the credits. Did you see Batman versus Superman?
I did not.
That's okay. You don't have to. But really, like, it was Tim Burton's Batman and Batman Begins are really like the only, like, they did it in both movies. I don't know why people think it was oversaturated. Same with Spider-Man. I mean, I guess with Spider-Man, it was bigger because all the Spider-Man origin stories came within like 10 years of each other, which is much more annoying.
The original Batman was like 1989 or something?
I think so. Yeah.
Late 80s. So
it was either 89 or 90. So it was
doing another one in 2005. That's a new generation of fans available.
What's crazy to me though is that it was only 8 years after Batman and Robin, and it feels like it was longer.
Everybody forgot about Batman.
I know. Batman
it.
and Robin is it's so bad. It's if you want to watch a bad movie, it's great. Like it's a really great bad movie.
That was one of the few movies I spent the whole time in the theater. Like, why am I not walking out right now? like I think I thought several times, like, I just need to walk out right now. But I didn't, because I was like, I don't know.
It's hilariously cheesy, but Batman Begins is not.
No.
Actually, the opening scenes of Insomnia where they're flying over the icy mountains reminds me, because I'd only seen Insomnia twice at this point, reminds me a lot of when Bruce Wayne is climbing up the mountains to find Ra's al Ghul early on in Batman Begins. Yeah, he and Wally Pfister, his traditional director of photography, they have a knack for beautiful looking films.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I love that we didn't just get to see the origin of, his parents getting killed. We really got to see his training, which was something we hadn't seen in the Tim Burton films. And for me, the best parts of this movie are the parts with Liam Neeson, actually.
Yeah, it's Liam Neeson. Everything he does is amazing.
At least in the beginning. I don't know. The ending kind of comes out of left field for me a little bit, but the early scenes with Liam Neeson are incredible. I'm glad that he didn't retire after The Phantom Menace, and we got to see him in this, and he got to have his little career renaissance. And this is the first time we got to have Michael Caine in a Chris Nolan film, and as many of us know, that is a relationship that would last through this day, all the way through Tenet. He's even in Dunkirk. He's one of the radio announcers. Just never see him, but he has been in every Chris Nolan film since, which is incredible. I don't know why he picked Caine. It's not a bad choice. Caine is a wonderful actor. He just always seems to write a role for Michael Caine, which is great.
I would write a role for Michael Caine in my movie. I mean, why not?
And Batman Begins would definitely. This is the first film where you did start to see him working with a lot of the same actors again. You'd see Bale in The Prestige the next year.
Cillian Murphy, who was one of my personal favorites in the Batman trilogy. I love Scarecrow.
Yep, Cillian Murphy would appear.
and I think Cillian Murphy is a very underrated actor.
Yep. I find it a little bit shocking that he has not worked with Morgan Freeman again, because Morgan Freeman, who wouldn't want to cast Morgan Freeman in their movie?
Well, he's probably too busy. I don't know.
Could be. Actually, Cillian Murphy is also one of my favorite parts of Batman Begins, because the Scarecrow was a great character. I don't remember the Scarecrow from the comics. I didn't start reading the comics until after actually Batman Begins. But I remember Scarecrow from Batman the Animated Series in the 90s, and was an awesome villain in that. So it was really cool to actually see Scarecrow brought to life. Actually kind of shocking that a bold choice for Christopher Nolan to do the first Batman movie with Ra's al Ghul and Scarecrow, when you would have expected him to jump in with, say, either Joker, Riddler, or Penguin, one of the big villains that had either already been done in a Tim Burton movie or was well known from the '60s Batman TV series, because that's where a lot of people kind of recognized a lot of the Batman villains was from the TV show. Or to actually pick one of the bigger enemies from the animated series, like Two-Face. But of course, as we all know, those villains would appear later on, which is great.
I wonder if he just starting out in a big franchise like that, I have a feeling like he'd be smart enough to just be like, I'm going to do these characters that this is the first time like mass audiences have seen them. And they're not going to have any expectations going in.
That could be it. He did co-write the script with David Goyer, and so I don't know how much of it was David Goyer's idea. But I appreciate that after what they did with the Joel Schumacher films, how they became increasingly more absurd, that they tried to really ground this Batman in a semi-realistic world, in a world that at least didn't look like it grew out of the mind of Tim Burton and evolved from that. And don't get me wrong, that Batman and Batman Returns are really fun. But once Burton left, that series just went off the rails.
Yeah, no offense to like Anne Hathaway, but Michelle Pfeiffer, best Catwoman. Sorry.
Agreed. So yeah, it's really good. It was really good to see a Gotham that actually looked like New York, which is really what Gotham is supposed to be based on. What else have we got here? We can get back to Batman later because we're going to be talking a lot about Batman. And honestly, we may not talk that much about Batman because everyone talked about it back in 2008. I think The Dark Knight got talked about to death. So The Prestige.
Yeah, I know. I feel like Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises are kind of flipped by like the all-consuming The Dark Knight.
It's true.
Like the big one everyone remembers.
Actually, I do remember, when I saw Batman Begins, we'd already had 2 X-Men movies, 2 Spider-Man movies, but Batman Begins was my favorite back then. And I remember in 2005 thinking, no one's ever going to make a superhero origin movie as good as this. Well, Marvel proved me wrong. And we'll talk about why that is when we get to The Dark Knight. But let's talk about The Prestige. Just about a year later, 2006. It only took about a year between Batman Begins and The Prestige, which is really impressive.
Especially after waiting like 3 years after Insomnia.
He already brings back Christian Bale and Michael Caine. And this is probably, I would say, The Prestige is his last sort of intimate picture. The last one in which the scope and scale are pretty intimate. Yes, there's some globe trotting to be done, but there's not a lot of insane action sequences. The Dark Knight would define Nolan for the next 10 years. And The Prestige, yeah, it's just that last little bit of drama that he left behind with Memento and Following.
I feel like Prestige is definitely harking back to the unreliable narrator, being such a huge part of like Following and Memento. And then in The Prestige, you have like multiple unreliable narrators.
Yeah, and for different reasons too. Yeah, not because they have Leonard's mental condition, but because these two are deliberately lying to each other and leading each other down the wrong path throughout the entire film. Or I should say, spoiler alert, these 3 are leading each other. So if you haven't seen The Prestige, we'll talk the non-spoiler stuff now. It is a story about dueling magicians. I mean, that's really at the core of it, is they're dueling magicians. I can't say too much more without getting into spoiler alerts. So spoiler alert,
Yeah, it's one of those like less you know about it going into it, the better movies, I think, which are a lot of Chris Nolan's movies. But
so if you've seen The Prestige, watch on, my friend, to recap a tale of dueling magicians. And I love the sort of intersection of real life history, because obviously the stuff that Nikola Tesla does in this film is fictional, but his feud with Edison is, that's very real.
Well, and in his day, I mean, there was a lot of people convinced that Nikola Tesla was a wizard. I mean, that a lot, like if you read, historical stuff about him, a lot of people were convinced he was a wizard, and they were really like weirded out by him and were like scared of him and what he was inventing.
And we can definitely assume that he never invented a machine that could duplicate matter, but you never know.
You never know.
There's
maybe he invented it and destroyed it.
I'm sure he probably had a lot of amazing inventions that are lost to history because of that feud with Edison. We probably actually would be living in a much cleaner energy world if Tesla had been allowed to, really be the one who created that infrastructure. That's sort of the assumption that you get from reading about that whole feud, is that Edison, Edison was economical, but Tesla's was, actually revolutionary.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually reading a book, strangely enough, right now that's a fictional account of the war between them. It's called The Last Days of Night. And yeah, it's pretty, like, I'm curious to see how, I'm assuming the author put a lot of research into it. So I'm curious afterwards. I'm gonna have to go and find out like how much was true and how much was fictionalized, but it's pretty interesting. But can we say David Bowie as Tesla was pretty awesome?
Yes. And speaking of authors, it should be noted that Christopher Nolan did write the script for this one, but it is based on a book.
It is. I've read the book.
It's very good.
Yes, very good. It's really different. The two are really different, but the book is good too. They're both really good.
Same unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
But the book puts you in the shoes of an outsider, so it actually kind of feels like you are
like
reading.
Descendants, right? Book is like, it starts with the descendants of the two magicians, basically like finding out, reading the diaries about this feud between their ancestors that were magicians. And in the book too, we're okay with spoilers now. In the book, they reveal right away that Borden has a twin. Whereas in the movie, that's something they don't reveal until the end, which I think is interesting. In the book, the mystery is really more like what allowed Angier to do these tricks. Because you knew Borden had the twin, but what was allowing Angier to do this trick? And then you find out at the end, like, he's still got one of his clones, like, wandering around the family's mausoleum.
Yeah, it's even darker than the movie.
Yeah.
Again, Nolan brings us a slightly happier version. I don't want to say too happy though, because it's a pretty sad ending.
But he gets his daughter back, so there's one happy thing.
So yeah, it's Christian Bale is the Borden twins, I should say, and Hugh Jackman is Angier in the movie. It was really fun to see it in the theater, like not knowing anything about it, going into it thinking, oh cool, it's going to be Batman versus Wolverine. And actually, I think it was for me the first major film outside of the X-Men films I'd seen with Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, I really like Hugh Jackman's performance in it a lot. He's another one. I like him sometimes. Sometimes he's a little much, but I really liked his performance in this movie, which makes me feel like there's just certain actors that Christopher Nolan gets really good kind of understated performances out of. This I would say is my next favorite after Memento, but I think a big part of that is just because I really, really love the idea of magicians. Like, that's like candy to me. I don't like, It's just something I'm really, really interested in. And I remember this movie coming out around the same time as another magician movie called The Illusionist. And I just I can't remember which one I saw first, but I remember like The Illusionist was like not the magician movie I was looking for. It's not bad. It's just like not what I was looking for. This
No.
movie I felt like was the magician movie I was looking for. Like,
Yeah, The Illusionist. The Illusionist is a good one. I didn't see The Illusionist in the theater. I saw it. I just blind bought that one on DVD. I'd heard enough good things about it. But
it's a much more romantic take
yeah.
on the idea of magicians.
I also, I talk about how The Prestige is, one of Nolan's last intimate films. It, by comparison to The Illusionist, it still feels like the bigger budget thriller film. The Illusionist, yeah, it was a slow burner for sure. I love The Prestige just because, I love magicians and I love the era.
Yeah, that too.
It's even though it's probably about 70 or 80 years later than Frankenstein is supposed to take place, it still sort of has that Mary Shelley vibe to it.
Mm-hmm.
And Tesla coming in with the amazing electrical apparatus definitely has a Mary Shelley vibe.
Well, totally.
Tesla,
his electrical apparatus is bringing forth life. I would say it's got a big tie to Frankenstein.
Yep, for sure. And it probably takes place around the same time as Dracula. So I love that era. Anyone who knows me knows how much I love my gothic horror films.
And not only do you have Batman and Wolverine, you also have Black Widow.
Yes. Yeah, Scarlett Johansson in one of her pre-Marvel roles.
And was it Rebecca Hall in one of the Iron Man movies too?
Yeah. That was, I think, the first movie I'd seen Rebecca Hall in, I think. Actually, I think it was when just a couple years ago I came up to visit you and Dustin and we watched it. And it was the first time I kind of realized, oh my God, that's Rebecca Hall.
Yeah.
Who I've now seen in like 5 other films. Yeah, I love her in that.
Yeah, she's really great. I think Scarlett Johansson was a little miscast in that movie. I don't know that she's as bad as some people say she was in it, but I think she was a little miscast.
Yeah, that was also like, there was sort of this little era, I think, between Match Point and Iron Man 3, or not Iron Man 3, Iron Man 2, where her career had kind of lulled. And The Prestige is definitely a good film to showcase her, but like I remember people saying, "Oh yeah, Iron Man 2 is the movie that saved her career," which is kind of a shame because like she had done some very good movies in the early 2000s, and including The Prestige. Again, yeah, she's not terrible in it, but she's definitely not the highlight.
Yeah,
sure.
I wouldn't say she's like as bad as the girl in Batman Begins. Katie, I can't think of
Katie Holmes.
I wouldn't say she's that bad, but Katie Holmes. You were good in Dawson's Creek.
Yep.
You were very miscast in Batman Begins.
The Prestige, actually, it also there's a trademark sort of Nolan storytelling bit in The Prestige, and obviously this comes from the book as well. But The Prestige would be the first film in which one of the main characters is a father trying to reunite with their children. That's something that's going to pop up again in Inception and in Interstellar. And Interstellar, I think, was sort of the pinnacle of that, which we'll talk about 5 movies from now. I don't know. But yeah, it is. And honestly, this time I watched it around. This time around when I watched it, as much as I love the movie and I think the characters are fascinating, I really, for the first time, felt like, oh my God, the men in this movie are terrible. Just like Leonard in Memento, like they're really not good people. And I felt especially bad for Rebecca Hall's character Sarah this time around. Is like, oh my gosh.
You get the feeling that Borden kind of comes around in the end and realizes how crappy he's been. And maybe, getting his daughter back is hopefully his opportunity to live a better life from here on out. But it's tough. Yeah. But they definitely are very selfish and make some And I guess that's part of the interesting thing about that movie is I think it doesn't really tell you in the end, like who was the villain and who was the hero. I mean, there wasn't really like a hero and a villain. It was like they both kind of kept one-upping each other and how like, how much of a jerk they were being.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's like I feel like it kind of makes you want to decide like, okay, who do I think like
Yeah, who am I rooting for?
I'm not sure.
And it's
I
like,
feel like at the end I was rooting for Borden, but there were definitely parts in it where I went back and forth.
well, and I think the fascinating part about rewatching The Prestige is, when you know how it ends, is trying to figure out, okay, which Borden do we have in this particular scene? And some of them are really easy. Like, his relationship with Sarah, it's very easy to figure out which Borden is which.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and that's another, it's like, like the Borden who's living at the end. I mean, you kind of got the feeling that a lot of he was going along with it, but he didn't seem to be a driver of the ambition and trying to, like, you definitely got the sense there was one twin that was driving it and the other one was kind of weakly going along and not like fighting him.
I want to believe that in that there's the scene where Borden is talking to Fallon, who we of course now know is other Borden, towards the end, and he says it's after Angier comes back and he has the apparatus, and they can't figure out how he's making it work, and he says, "We're done. Don't go see him again. Don't go there anymore." I want to believe that that's the Borden who survives, and has the daughter. That's what I want to believe, because I want to believe that. I also want to believe that's the Borden who ties the right knots at the beginning of the film. Yeah. I want to believe that ambitious Borden is the one who accidentally kills Angier's wife.
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes sense to me. Like, I know it's, and I'm sure that's like some people want to know for sure, but I like that the movie lets you kind of put those pieces together yourself and decide, which one you think. I mean, in my mind, the one who's married to Sarah and has the daughter is the one that you pretty much see do the better, like, kinder things. And the other one, the one who hooks up with, I can't think of the character's name, but
Lucy. Yeah, Lucy.
Yeah. The one that hooks up with her is the one that seems to be kind of the more like driver of the success and the ambition. And it seems to me like he's the one that's really like at odds with Angier. Whereas like, it's interesting because it's like, you see scenes with Borden where he's not really hammering on the Angier thing, and then you see scenes where he is. So it definitely makes you feel like, well, maybe these scenes were the one, because I almost got the sense that one was more often Fallon, that Fallon was more often kind of like the gentler one, and Borden was more often the showman. But that's up to you to interpret. So.
Yep. I also want to think that the kinder Borden is the one who comes to the funeral at the beginning and says, "I don't know which knot I tied."
Yeah, well, because he doesn't, right? Because I think he's not the one that tied it. And the other one, it's like you wonder, like, so did the other one just like, wanted nothing to do with it, felt like he didn't do nothing wrong, but this twin felt guilty and felt like he needed to go to the funeral. Maybe he really genuinely liked her. Maybe he was mad at his twin for like, whatever he might have done. That it's interesting.
And maybe if his brother hadn't been so ambitious, like maybe this other board, maybe we'll call the nice Borden A. Maybe Borden A could have actually had a good relationship with Angier as a career and possible partner. We've talked a lot about The Prestige. Let's move on to what I call the game changer. That is The Dark Knight. This movie, I mentioned earlier, this movie like changed so much for Nolan. And this time around, he wrote the screenplay with his brother, David Goyer, I think wrote parts of the story. But really, this is Nolan's Batman film. And it's not even really a Batman film. This is a crime film. in which the antagonist takes more of a central role than Batman does. Yeah, we all remember this movie for the Joker.
And it's so funny because I remember, I mean, do you remember before it came out, just all the controversy about, oh, no one's going to be as good of a Joker as Jack Nicholson? Like,
I am pretty sure I've said this on the show before. It was for trailers. You were here for trailers, right?
yes.
Yeah, that was us. That was you, me, and Dea.
Yeah.
Yeah, how that first teaser for The Dark Knight was just Heath Ledger's voice, doing the and the laugh, and it was like, okay, I'm in. It would be about a year later, but I was already in.
I feel like I had utmost confidence in Heath Ledger that he would do a good job. But I remember I just remember hearing like a lot of people were like, oh, I just don't think anyone can be as good as Jack Nicholson.
For me, it wasn't necessarily a comparison to Jack Nicholson. It was just, and I've talked about this with Marvel movies. It's like it just seems so against type. Heath Ledger was, 10 Things I Hate About You. That's what everyone knew Heath Ledger for before The Dark Knight. It's like, I don't know, romantic comedy. Yeah, The Patriot. I kind of try to forget The Patriot and most things with Mel Gibson. I think he's a little overrated outside of Lethal Weapon.
I do too. I just feel like that was a movie that gave Heath Ledger, like, that put him out there.
That's true. But yeah, and then his tragic death just months before it opened. I think that really that trailer and his death really, I don't think it sucks to say this. I don't think The Dark Knight would have been as successful. I think people really did go to see it to honor his memory, and then went to see it 10 more times because he was so good in it. I'm pretty sure I saw it. I think of all the Nolan movies I've seen, saw that one in the theater most, probably about 4 or 5 times.
I feel like that's probably a big part of why, because didn't he win an Oscar for that?
Yep.
Like, I feel, and not that he didn't deserve it and shouldn't have won, but not often do you see like that kind of role win an Oscar, no matter how good the person is.
Yep.
But so I'm sure I'm sure that was like a big part of it too.
Oh, that actually reminds me. I did dress appropriately for the day. I mean, yeah. So Christopher Nolan really, he took what he had built on in Batman Begins, and he grounded it even more. This is sort of, I think, of all the modern comic book films, the least comic booky. It's got those handful of scenes where Batman goes over to China to bring Lau back. That's definitely comic booky, but like most of it really is just a crime movie with a brilliant actor in clown makeup. And it continues his trend. I love that. I love that the Joker has like no origin in this. It really speaks to the research they did with, how Joker in the comic books has several origins, and you don't really know which one to go off of. And once again, we have an unreliable, not narrator, but we have an unreliable storyteller, since he has at least 2 origins that he gives to people in the movie, but there's no way to know which ones are true.
Yeah, but like, does it matter? I mean, clearly
No.
he's clearly he's chaos incarnate.
It absolutely does not matter. I love that they can't find any, when the police arrest him, they can't find any evidence of who he is. No identifying marks, nothing at all. Bruce does that one scene where he does the fingerprint from the ballistics, and he ties it back to someone who may be named, like, I think it's like Michael White. And it's like, yeah, but that could just be an alias. Like, really, he ties it back to like 3 different people, and it's like, you never know. And I think that's wonderful. And I think it's kind of, I don't want to say it's ruined the Joker for future actors, but like no one's hit it.
Some time. Well,
Like,
I don't know if Jared Leto was the best attempt, but
you know,
I think it's, yeah. I mean, I think it's going to take some time because I feel like our generation is not going to see anyone but Heath Ledger as the Joker. So
well,
you're going to need like a new, I don't know.
I think some people have gone over to the Joaquin Phoenix side, because it was just a movie about the Joker, but
But
you know,
I haven't seen that yet because it's felt a little too dark to watch right now.
it's very dark, and
Yeah.
I don't think it's actually as good as some people say it is.
Yeah,
It's
but I feel like that's, to me, it sounds like, from what I've heard of it, like it's kind of a completely separate thing
yeah,
from what Chris Nolan's Batman movies were.
yep, it's
Like,
definitely its own thing. But um, the one thing it does differently from Heath Ledger's, interpretation and Chris Nolan's interpretation is it gives him a definitive origin. It gives him, he was a person before he became the Joker. Um, I love that whole concept of there's no way to know who the heck he is.
mm-hmm.
It kind of does make him the perfect villain because you can't empathize with who he was before.
Yeah.
We love Loki because Loki has a tragic backstory, and even when Loki goes evil, we still love him.
Well, even within the Dark Knight, I mean, we see the, what creates Two-Face through the movie. Like we see, and so we can empathize with him because we see like what creates him. And he's got, the amazing line from that movie: "You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain." So it's like we kind of have that to counteract just the chaos of the Joker, and that sometimes evil doesn't have an origin, doesn't have a reason.
Yep.
It just is just chaos for chaos's sake. There's that too out there.
Yeah, it's also another interesting one to watch in 2020 when
Mm-hmm.
we're dealing with everything that we're dealing with, where in the Dark Knight, it's like police are corrupt because they're bought off by the mob, and it's like, in Hollywood that may be the case, but that's, it's I think it's going to be really hard to tell the next Batman story, and have the police play that same role that they did in Chris Nolan's films. It's just not going to be the same, and it shouldn't be the same.
I have to say, like, I haven't had a lot of drive to watch like the newer Batman stuff that's come out. Maybe I will someday, but I kind of feel like Chris Nolan's Batman movies were, for me, like the definitive Batman movies. And I don't feel as much drive to go watch a new version of Batman right now. I don't know.
Well, you're really, I think Ben Affleck he brought something to the role, some positive stuff to the role, I think, in Batman versus Superman, but overall, you're not missing that much. Unless this Justice League Snyder cut is incredible, yeah, you're really not missing much.
I'm pleased with Wonder Woman. Like, I'm excited for the Wonder Woman movie because she was never in any. But yeah, I kind of feel like I can wait a while before I need a new Batman story.
Wonder Woman in general, tonally, is the direction that DC just kind of, I think, needs to go.
Mm-hmm. I do really want to watch Birds of Prey. I have that on my list.
Yes, yeah, yep, do that. I will continue to endorse that film. I think Dark Knight, as great as a movie as it is, it really kind of it set the tone in exactly the wrong way for DC and how to approach their films in the future. They kept Nolan as a producer on Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman and Justice League. I don't know what it is he contributed to those three films, but actually he wrote Man of Steel. I know that. But you can't make every superhero gritty and brooding like Batman is. Superman is supposed to be that beam of light. He's supposed to be the Captain America of DC, and so far they're missing that.
Well, and just I don't like seeing Henry Cavill in Witcher. I feel like the Superman, if the Superman movie could have been a little more tongue in cheek, it would have been way more fun.
Oh, it's like it's nothing against Henry Cavill. I loved him in Mission Impossible Fallout. He was the delight in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., even though The Man from U.N.C.L.E. is, it was an okay spy movie, but he was a lot of fun in it. So yeah, Dark Knight. Um, Here we go. I was going to talk about this. Yeah. So that was the summer of 2008. It came out 2 months after Iron Man. So these are, summer 2008 is the two films that sort of redefined comic book movies, one for the better and one for the worse, even though The Dark Knight itself is incredible. It's just hard to go back to that summer and think about The Dark Knight being such a big influential film now when Iron Man brought forth 20 some movies that have generally been exceptionally good.
Well, yeah, Marvel definitely has had a really great balance of dark and light. Like, their movies can seem to be both dark and fun. And I think they've come to where they've got a really good balance with that. Not everybody can pull off like The Dark Knight. And looking to Chris Nolan's previous movies, he has a knack for making something really dark watchable, for making really unlikable characters, unreliable narrators, like compelling. He's just got a knack for that. I don't think just any director can pull that off the way Christopher Nolan can.
That being said, I'm glad that Nolan hasn't been too involved in what Warner Brothers and DC have been doing since, because I appreciate that they've let him go off to do his own thing with Inception and Interstellar and everything that he's done since. And I appreciate that they sort of let him tell his story and not force Christian Bale into signing a contract and say, you need to come back and do this, 5 more times. Or Chris Nolan saying, you need to stretch this out because we now have to compete with Marvel. Instead, they, thankfully, by The Dark Knight Rises said, let's finish this.
Yeah.
Which was great.
And we haven't got to that movie yet, but I kind of felt like when I saw The Dark Knight Rises that it felt like they were kind of done with it. I mean, not that it's bad. And it was kind of in the shadow of The Dark Knight, but I definitely got the feeling watching that movie that they were kind of done at that point. And they were like, we were contracted to do this movie. Like, I don't know. But we'll get to that later.
And that is going to be it for part 1 of Christopher Nolan. We ran a little long again this week, so we're going to cut the episode in half. And we'll be back later with our thoughts on Inception, The Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar, Dunkirk, and what little we know about Tenet. So stay tuned. We'll be back soon.